Hey guys, it's VaulSC here. Welcome back to another video and another episode of Let's Build Some Lists. Sorry it has been a while since the last one. For those of you guys who haven't watched these before, this is the video series where I talk about army list building for Infinity, and it's N4 obviously. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through 3 different lists and I'm going to build them from scratch, and it's just going to allow me to show you guys a bit more about my thought process and comment on game balance, comment on factions, comment on what units are cool, which ones are interesting, which ones are required to build a good competitive list, but also just have a bit of fun with the thought process, just the construction of making an army list. So many of you guys enjoy building army lists and talking about it just as much as you enjoy playing, so stick with me as I go through a few different armies and we'll have a good time with it. So, I'm going to do 3 of them. The first one that I'm going to start with is actually going to be a list from Ikari Company, which is one of my favorite factions, has been for a really long time. Once N4 came out, I felt like a few things had become a little bit weaker, but as time has passed, I'm actually starting to come back to them and really like them. We've all sort of rediscovered JSA recently as being the faction that has benefited from N4 quite drastically, in the sense that the tankos, extremely cheap and very cost effective and really work well with new N4 rules. The Daiokai Dengakutai has been buffed like crazy. He's obviously got 2 wounds plus shock, and armor helps with the new edition, and his multi-marksman rifle's a lot better. Then there's the Karakuri, which I think is not quite as good as it was in the previous edition in terms of how its total immunity works, but the fact that it's got 3 wounds straight up rather than 2 wounds and dogged is just such a large buff as well. So playing Ikari Company is a little bit like JSA. You've got some of the really, really good JSA units there, but it does allow you to bring in a few things that JSA doesn't have. JSA doesn't have the ability to have the Brawler Sniper, for example. JSA doesn't have some of the little warbands that you can take with Ikari Company. So let's get into it, and I'm just going to sort of explain how I would go about building an Ikari list. You really got to start, because it's a sectoral, you really got to think about what your core link team is going to look like, because you do want to play a core. And the 2 options that you ultimately have are either to build a Kaisotsu link team, keeping it nice and cheap, with the Tanko joining them, with the Brawler Sniper perhaps joining them, that kind of thing. Or you can build your link team around the Wu Ming, who are still quite cheap. You can sort of keep the cost in check with a Brawler or a Clipper going in with them. And the Wu Ming gives you the opportunity to have the HMG there in the link team, which, to be honest, you are going to need an HMG somewhere in the list just to deal with the inevitable situation of, the other guy's got something which is in a link team and it's an open battlefield and they're just watching the entire table, and you need some sort of gun that can take the enemy down there. And that's one thing that Ikari does a little bit better than JSA, actually, having this option for the Wu Ming HMG there. And I definitely recommend, if you're going to a tournament, maybe have one list with the Kaisotsus and one with the Wu Ming. That's probably how I would do it. But today we're going to explore the Kaisotsu version, because it's usually the one that I go with. Kaisotsu Lieutenant, 0.5 SWCs. So, idea here is that if you can afford the SWC point, this Kaisotsu, same willpower as the Brawler, but he saves you some points. You're going to have a lieutenant in here somewhere, and it's going to probably be the Kaisotsu or the Brawler. Looking at these 2 options, obviously you save yourself 6 points by going with the Kaisotsu, or you save yourself half an SWC with the Brawler. So this is a question we're going to come back to towards the end of the list. For now, I'm going to make it just your basic Kaisotsu. And if we come back to the Kaisotsus really quick, I think I'll add in 1 paramedic, so we have at least 1 specialist there, a lieutenant decoy, because, it's probably better to not, if you can avoid it, not have your opponent know who your lieutenant's going to be. In fact, by doing it this way, that's another reason why we might go for the Kaisotsu rather than the Brawler at the end of the day. But the setup allows us to then come down to the Tankos, of which you're always going to take 3, no matter what you're doing. The Tanko is just so undercosted, you need it there to just to keep up with other powerful factions. So we're going to grab the missile launcher and 2 of the Flammensphere guys. The Flammensphere guys are the cheapest you can take, and the Flammensphere are extremely useful in a link team, and they are still reasonably good at close range because you're just dodging and trying to get into close combat. Sometimes you're going to wish you had an SMG or a Blitzen or a shotgun, but most of the time the Tankos with the Flammensphere really is the way to go. They're just so dangerous, and they're so cheap. But the point being is that the missile launcher guy, only 27 points, and, you know, behind cover at armor 6, link team ballistic skill 16. You can revive him with the paramedic or the tokusetsu if you want to take that later. And then you can add your brawler if you want to keep the link team nice and cheap. You can just go for another Kaisotsu, but I kind of like taking the brawler for a bit of extra firepower here, because there are going to be some games where you are going to be up against something with ODD. Oh, I keep calling ODD. I'm a veteran of N3. I'm talking about Mimetism -6, of course, which this guy helps you to deal with. And the occasional smoke cloud as well is going to help you deal with that as well. Don't forget that this is a faction that can provide smoke cloud. So if we are playing the list, if we're building the list systematically, I'm going to want to come down here and either grab your Jimbo or the Desperado, possibly both, but the Desperado with assault pistol is only 6 points. That is cheap as dirt. I love the fact that his Impetuous Order can generate the smoke for you. The fact that he's irregular is not too big a deal. And this is a guy that, if he just dies, it doesn't really matter, but if your opponent just ignores him, chain rifle, assault pistol with 5 shots kind of thing, good in close combat, just generating smoke for you, helping you to get onto objectives, and obviously that synergy with the brawler sniper. So if you're going first and your opponent has some sort of annoying setup that doesn't have Sixth Sense, then what you're going to do is roll up with your Desperado, 8-inch move to get into position, and then you throw the smoke, landing on a 16. Pretty good value there, and then your brawler sets up behind that, fires through the smoke. Your opponent, if they're shooting back, if they don't have Sixth Sense or they don't have MSV, they're going to be at a -6 penalty, which is really going to swing the face-to-face roll in your favor. Okay, let's make my little cam a little bit smaller over here so that we can see the list so far, and I'm just going to start zooming in. Let's make a 100 and... I think that's comfortable. Maybe go one more 120% version here, so everybody can see what's going on with this list. No, I'm going to go back down on 110. There you are. Cool, let's keep going. So, we have the Tankos there. The Tankos do have Fireteam Harris. Sometimes it's better for them to just roll out with Impetuous by themselves, but if we click on Tankos, up to 1 brawler can be part of a fire team of Tankos. Ultimately, it'd be cool if you could have another Tanko here, but we've used up our availability. So what I'm going to do is come back to the brawlers here and pick another brawler. I mean, I can't believe there are going to be 2 brawlers in this list. I hate brawlers, but we could put a basic rifle light shotgun in there with them. I think the heavy rocket launcher is not the way, because the Tankos already have that kind of long-range AROs, and typically they're better at it than the brawler because they're BS-13. But one idea I have is actually this hacker with SMG, and a few thoughts about that. There are going to be some situations where you really just want to shoot really close range. The Tankos only have a pistol, so the brawler's going to be a little bit better with his SMG. Also, being a hacker, you're vulnerable to killer hackers and things, and he's only whip 12. But he's just going to be staying back somewhere annoying and providing that third man of the Harris. But being a hacker means that at least you have something if your opponent walks within range of your inevitable, Fugazi. If we chuck a Fugazi in there, for example, that's great. And if I come down here and get a Pangolin baggage bot, these are kind of useful things because they have repeaters, or at least I think they have a repeater. Yeah, he's got a repeater. And sometimes your opponent's just going to be coming really close to you with just some random unit, and having at least one unit that can spotlight or do the total control or oblivion or whatever it might be is still kind of handy. So at 17 points, even though I think he's overcosted and not a very good unit, in the context of the list, I think he's a little bit better than just taking your 15-point brawler with a rifle light shotgun in a lot of cases. I might be wrong about that, but I really want to give this a go. And then if we've put our 2 bots there, we've at least got a little bit of a repeated network nearby to our deployment zone, which is kind of cool. The Pangolin I especially like because the baggage allows you to replenish the Flammensphere, and the Flammenspheres for the Tanko obviously, can run out of ammunition, but you want to be able to replenish on rare occasion. So that's something you're going to be doing. Let me just move my Brawler, sorry, my Desperado down to Group 2. There we go. Still only spent half the points of the list. So now's when I come to my point man or point woman or point robot or whoever it's going to be and grab the Karakuri. I love the idea of the Karakuri. We've already determined that we're going to be replenishing our Flaming Spears with the baggage bot. Note also that you can be replenishing your Karakuri with the Panzerfausts as well, so there's still a little bit more synergy here. The wonderful thing about the Karakuri is that in this edition, 3 structure points plus remote presence means that if you just stuff her behind a wall near your deployment zone and your opponent moves out with an HMG and starts shooting her, or with a sniper rifle or whatever it may be, it's very, very hard to get rid of her. And it's a little bit like shooting an Overdrone. You've got to do 3 wounds to it and then another 2 wounds to her to remove it. But unlike the tag, she can actually drop prone, which actually makes her even better at surviving, which I find really, really crazy. Because the profiles are all fairly similarly costed, I personally like the multi-rifle one because there are going to be some games where she does move out and attack, and the multi-rifle just is the gun to be using if you're going to be moving midfield and doing a face-to-face roll. Plus, if you get an enemy come to like 18, 20 inches away, that kind of range band, the multi-rifle's the best arrow. Sorry, I said the wrong number there. Between 8 and 16 is obviously the sweet spot for the multi-rifle, where the arrow with the double action round is going to be better than chain rifling or panzerfausting. Sometimes the flash pulse is better, but if you want to kill something, the multi-rifle gives you that choice. So I'm loving that. Next, I'm just going to see if we can afford Scarface in this list. There's a reason why I want to see if we can afford Scarface. So if we come down here, my favorite loadout is the one that has the AP HMG, because it's very helpful to have something in your list with armor piercing at long range to deal with the, a tag, basically. I mean, if you're up against a Yotum, the Scarface can actually beat him, but not if he doesn't have armor piercing. So loadout Beta is the one we're going for. That's 81 points. So it looks like we're going to be able to manage this. If I move Scarface right to the top of Group 1, so we're just going to bring this all the way up here. The cool thing about this is that Scarface comes with Cordelia. And Cordelia, I'm just going to move my face cam over here. So Cordelia is Willpower 13 Brawler. Willpower 13, which is better than a Brawler, because a Brawler, you're paying something like 19 points for your Engineer, and Cordelia can actually fight because she's got Mimetism. And I think she can duo with the tag, or am I only thinking of... oh no, she's got duo, and he's got duo, so she can duo with the tag, but sometimes she's just going to be standing next to the Karakuri. So the Karakuri, you get hit, you duck behind cover, or maybe you're rendered unconscious and you drop prone as a result because she's not a tag, and then Cordelia simply revives her and the Karakuri stands up and is just as annoying as it was previous turn, which I really, 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 really like. And with Scarface in there, you've got the HMG, which isn't really present anywhere else in the list. I mean, there are going to be some enemies where you don't really want to brawl a sniper, you don't really want to sort of be firing 2 shots at a time with the Tanko. The Karakuri's at long range, but Scarface does have the resilience and the ability to actually win the face-to-face roll and chop something down. So this is suddenly a list with some really big aero potential. The Karakuri, just crazy. I mean, good luck taking that down on one turn. And even if you do, we're bringing her back with Cordelia. Scarface can Panzerfaust them. We've got a Tanko missile launcher and a Brawler Sniper and 2 Tanko Flaming Spears contenders, which are in a Harris. So it's starting to look crazy. What I then do is bring the Fugazi to Group 2. And I may have to even bring the... tell you what, I'm going to bring the entire Harris here to Group 2, just in case we have some games where we want to do a lot of moving out. In fact, if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I'll keep a whole group of 6 there, and then in Group 1 I've got 1, 2, 3, because Scarface and Cordelia is a unit of 2, so Karakuri, Scarface, Cordelia, that's 3, then plus my full-length team, that brings me to 8. I've got 6 in this group, so that's 14, which means I can afford 1 more unit, and it could be a 22-point unit with 5 SWCs. So let's just have a quick look through. It's a shame we can't take another Tanko. Wu Mings are too expensive at this point. Yuan Yuans are really, really cool. They were more of a thing in the previous edition because there was no unit cap. I don't really want to go with the Yuan and Ikari very much these days because the Desperado is better for starting on the table and throwing the smoke down. And once the Desperado's on the table near your deployment zone where you want the smoke, it's better at rolling out, whereas the Yuan isn't. The Yuan can, restrain their impetuous off the table, which is cool. But again, because they take up a slot in your list, not really worth it. So, what could we put in here? I mean, it'd be awesome to have a doctor, in my opinion, because you've got all those tankos sitting around, and maybe the paramedics not really quite enough. Let's have a look. If I just put this Tokusetsu doctor in here, this may not be that. I may have to upgrade something else. If I put a Tokusetsu doctor in there and give her like a Yao Zhao, because that way she can spread out and help to revive the Tanko missile launcher or the Tankos in the Harris, which are not going to probably be deployed nearby. That gives me 5 points to upgrade something. So what I'm thinking about now is I wonder if there's a way of getting the Desperado and turning that into Yojimbo. That would be cool. One way I could do it is just chop that Brawler down and upgrade this guy, but it's only a difference of 2 points there. Just coming back to the Pangolin, they all have baggage, so I could upgrade this guy, but again, these guys don't really do very much. An Evo Hacker, there's nothing for me to really put the Evo Hacker thing onto. Assisted Fire doesn't work on the Karakuri because she's heavy infantry, not a remote. So I'll just have to look a bit more closely here. There's the Bounty Hunter. The question is whether you want a Bounty Hunter over and above one of these units, which we already have. It's a shame the Bounty Hunter can't join the Tankos, actually. Another way we could have gone is putting a Cube Jaeger instead of the Doctor, but I'm still kind of liking the Doctor. Crackot Renegades, just not quite as good as they used to be. Kendrat would be quite a fun one, so that's another option. Could take out the Doctor, put Kendrat in there, but I'm feeling like it might be better to just upgrade something else. If I go to the Kaisotsus, I could put a Kaisotsu Hacker in there. That's another way we could go. Scarface, no, I'm happy with the version of Scarface. I don't really want to do that. We could buff the Karakuri up to being a Mark 12 Karakuri. But again, the difference between a Mark 12 and a multi-rifle is just not that huge for the 3 points. So just not really sure if that's what I want to do. Pathfinder. We could take a Pathfinder instead of a Fugazi. Let's just have a quick look, because I actually don't mind that. Sensor is actually a pretty good ability. So if I just drop this down here like that, and drop this out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh wait, hang on. I think I've accidentally removed something here. I've got my Pangolin, and where's my Pathfinder? Let's come back to this guy. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So that's interesting. We could play it around that way. In fact, I quite like moving the Doctor over to this group, because there are going to be some games where you want to push further a little bit further forward with either your Desperado or your little group here, or the Doctor might have a lot of healing to do. So suddenly this list looks really, really cool. Whoops, clicked on the wrong thing. So let's talk about it. I feel like this list actually packs a fair bit of punch. If you want to go second, which is a very good thing to do on a lot of N4 missions, especially the Corvus Belli ones, you can really get away with stalling your opponent really, really, really hard. This is the kind of list that does want to watch the table rather than just hiding everything in total cover. What you do is you put your Karakuri somewhere obnoxious where it's just behind a wall. It can see, some pretty decent angles. And then your link team, the Tanko missile launcher, is just watching something from a long range where it's quite hard for them to get below its 24-inch range band. The Brawler and the Kaisotsus would hide for a bit because they're more active turn kind of pieces. Pathfinder, you'd obviously hide. The tankos would be sort of somewhere near a flank, and not watching like the entire table, but just watching some sort of sidelines, some sort of horizontal kind of spots there, where they can fire off with their Flaming Spear contenders. Brawler obviously just behind them in total cover, and your Desperado and everybody else is just hiding. So I think this is really cool. I'd be quite keen to play this a little bit more in TTS and just see how the games go. But yeah, I just really love the fact that the Karakuri is so well supported by Cordelia. Great, well that was our Ikari list. I think we'll move on to something else. NCA. It's a faction that has really interested me. NCA was a bit boring in the last edition. They now have a fire team that they can assemble, which packs a lot of firepower. And when I say firepower, what I specifically mean is that they can have some real face-to-face roll beasts in this Link team that win face-to-face rolls in different situations in different ways. What I mean by that is you can go with your Neoterra Bolt fire team, for example. So the MSV1 sniper is just gold. We all know this guy by now that, you know, Link team +3 to hit, range +3 to hit, and marksmanship ignoring cover. You're whacking them on 19. So that makes this guy kind of brutal. But the Aquila Guard, even though there's a lot of points, and you probably wouldn't want to do this in all lists, I find it really interesting how you can take a multi-marksman Aquila Guard in this list now. So, again, MSV3, MSV1, a little bit of redundancy, but there are going to be some situations where MSV3 is crucial, and MSV1's not going to cut it. And as you move into the late game, you roll out with this team, you go to the middle of the table, hitting something on 18s with 4 dice, with armor piercing, and just completely ignoring any smoke or mimetism -6, and just being in a situation where your opponent, their markers are going to get cleared out quite nicely by this guy. It's a lot of points. But with the unit cap the way it's working these days, you want to invest your points somewhere into some beefy units. And then, I know this is overkill, but this is sort of my way of thinking about NCA, is that you can come down here and add this Bulleteer with the Spitfire, if you wanted to. And to continue synergizing with that, you go back to the Machinist, and the Machinist can join Bolt, so you grab the NCA option for 16 points. And then you could add in one more wild card, or if you want to, you pop in the Lieutenant, which I quite like, and you go like this. There's your fire team. So we've spent half of our army points already, pretty much. But looking at this, so long as you're a little bit careful with it and you time your pushing out and your attacks kind of well, there's a really powerful tool for the various jobs you're going to encounter. So with the Bulleteer, that's going to be hitting on 15s with 5 dice and imposing the mimetism -6 on the enemy, so it's good for taking down their MSV stuff. The Aquila's going to be crazy at killing anything that has, obviously, a smoke in the way or mimetism -6. And then the Bolt multi-sniper, well, that's going to be crazy at long range, hitting on 19s, and some of the time you're going to be wrong with it. The problem with NCA is how you'd support a setup like this, and we have to sort of look at various ways of not just losing and getting rolled earlier on in the game, because our opponent's going to have various different things to move in and whack us. We're going to be up against people like McMurray or the Uberfall Commando guys, Margot and Durock, just lists like that where if we get put under pressure and we start to lose elements of the team, things aren't going to go that well. So, typical Neoterra list, we're going to have at least a couple of flash bots. I'm going to put all 3 in. We may upgrade another one later. The Auxilia, again, I kind of like the Auxilia just because with the unit cap nowadays, you don't want your order pool being eaten into as your opponent just sort of just walks in and because you haven't really got any good hacking or anything or mines or whatever. Having an Orc spot sort of out near the front of your deployment zone, just ready to lay down the flamethrower in case something comes by, that seems pretty good. I've only just noticed here that these guys have a deployable repeater. I think that's pretty cool. It might well be worth putting the Hexakiller Hacker in there, just given that the list in general is going to be, hacking is going to be a problem for it. Given these guys have deployable repeaters, the Hexakiller Hacker is not the worst idea in the world. SWCs would want more of. So we've already got the Machinist. It's possible that a couple of TR bots are going to be worthwhile here. Just going to have a look. Also, the Peacemaker is usually a good way to go. What if we put a couple of Sierra Drone bots in there? So we're really low on points now, which is fine. If we're going to go that way, I would be inclined to get the Evo in there. Because now the Evo can put assisted fire on either one of these TR bots or the Bulleteer. And I guess with this kind of setup, you can take damage with the drone bots and then revive them with the Machinist. The only problem is the Machinist. The issue here is he's not going to be able to use a PAL bot while he's in the link team, so that's possibly going to be a problem. Let's just have a quick look out to see what we can add to this list, which has 15 points. Can you take 2 mule bots? You could take 2 Evos if you wanted to, well. And that would actually allow you to have 2 lots of assisted fire going at the same time. That's actually kind of funny. I never thought about that. What about CSUs? They are for Fusiliers. And if we come down to Trauma Docs, we kind of need the Trauma Doc in there, guys. It's not really going to work that well otherwise, because inevitably you're going to lose your Bolt to some face-to-face rolls, and you want to make the most of his immunity to shock. So when he gets knocked down, goes unconscious behind the wall, the Trauma Doc's going to have something to say about that. So this is a bit closer to sort of something that interests me. If we look back at this and we think about this, about serious, like, high-level play, I think in the long run it might be better to build your list around the Fusiliers instead. The bolts are good, but if you run your Fusilier link team, if you drop the Aquila, just run some Fusiliers with a Bulleteer, or Aquila and the Fusiliers without the Bulleteer, and invest some of these points into like a tag or a Swiss Guard, I think that might be a bit more flexible. But again, you can run 2 lists. So the fun thing about this for NCA, I think, is that if you can survive a little bit and trade a little bit with your opponent, and just wait for that opportunity to roll out with this big fat link team, perhaps by spending some command tokens later in the game to consolidate with Group 2 moving into Group 1, that 5-man team there, and it's a shame they don't have any tactical awareness, but that 5-man team really just brutalizes face-to-face rolls and just steamrolls their way. It's a bit map dependent though. I mean, there's going to be some cases where it's like Nomads or Ariadna or something like that, and they're just all sort of stuffing their units into little cracks and crevices and hiding away from you and using a lot of hacking, which is one reason why I think that NCA isn't really right up their top tier faction, because they have a bit of trouble with that. But on tables where your opponent is just having to commit to shoot at you long range, whenever it's your turn, you're rolling out and you're getting to grips with those guns, and the guys in the link team there really are not messing around in terms of winning face-to-face rolls. So yeah, this is a bit of a look at how I might play NCA. Not 100% happy with this, but you can sort of see the thought process. Okay, lucky last, I want to let you guys in on a funny list which I made last year. So it's an older list, but it's funny, and it's going to seem like a meme list here. It's an Invincible Army list. It's going to seem like a meme list, but I think there is actually some merit to it, and I'm going to take this opportunity to explain why, okay? So I'm sure you'll have some objections to this, but let's just explain the premise here. So one thing about this sectorial is that the Lu Jing happens to be availability 4. Who would be crazy enough to take all 4 Lu Jings in one list? My thinking with the Lu Jing is if you go Spitfire and 3 boarding shotguns, and regardless of whether you go first or second, these guys can commit to combat jump explosion and just land, or they can try and break their way on the side of the board, and they do become very, very annoying. Normally the tactic when somebody's trying to jump on you with combat jump explosion is you dodge into close combat with them to prevent them from using their boarding shotgun. But the thing is, these guys are CC20, so they don't mind being tied up in close combat, especially if that opponent is something which is just CC13 or whatever it is. You've got 2 wounds, you may have a few attempts with your close combat weapon, you do have a shot close combat weapon and decent fizz, so winning a close combat isn't really out of the question for these guys. If they are not engaged, and if they do land and survive, remember this is a unit with NWI. if they land and survive, they can cause so much trouble with those boarding shotguns. And what you do is you land one or two of them, you clear a bit of a path, and then when you come in with the Spitfire is kind of freed up to start munching into the enemy deployment zone if all things go well. I want to point out that their combat jump stat is Phys 14 here, especially like that. It's not 13, it's 14. So if you then go down to your Pangolin and grab him, obviously he's going to be a must for this list, you can put up control jump. So these guys are landing on a 17. If the mission is firefight specifically, that is a scenario that actually gives all combat jump troops a +3. So the Lujing cannot fail to land. It will be landing on a 20 or less on a 20-sided dice. So for firefight in particular, they will always land unless your opponent has something like, hack transport on their enemy Evo, which is very rare these days. It just doesn't come up. So if you're an Invincible Army player and you're going to a tournament and one of the missions in the lineup is a firefight, consider this. It's a real potential, and I think you guys will understand more about what I mean as I build out the rest of the list. So, because we've spent so many freaking points, we are gonna have to be conservative here. I like to take the Zhanshi Link team with just one hideout. So I'm gonna grab a lieutenant and a couple of basic plebs and a paramedic, and the paramedic's purely there just to revive the hideout. We do need some long-range gun in the list. It's inevitable that you're going to have something at least, and the hideout multi-sniper is just very, very good at not only arrows, but active turn shooting, and yeah. The paramedic actually is not that great because of the NWI, so I might be rethinking that a little bit. Are you allowed to shoot at a hideout that's gone into NWI? I'm not really sure. We'll come back to that. The paramedic's still kind of okay because if you move out with a link team late game, your paramedic can be shooting at Lujing, which are unconscious on the ground, which normally a doctor doesn't do very well. So let's just leave that there. The other idea I have here is because we've already committed to the Pangolin and because we need to keep the cost of the list down, we're going to take a couple of flash pulse bots. We're going to take a TR bot. I was going to take 2, but I'm not too sure if we'll be able to afford it. We are going to need a mech engineer, and we've got enough for one more unit. It'd be really cool if I could get another TR bot, but I can't. I've only got 19 points here. So was it going to be a doctor? No, it doesn't need to be a doctor. It needs just to be something which... in fact, if we're going to use SWCs, one funny way to go might actually be to put the HMG in there. Because there are going to be some games where our opponent just has some really obnoxious like war core or flash pulse bots hanging around, and they're directly in the way of us landing the Lujing. So having something which can kind of spray them down sort of appeals to me a little bit there. Back to the Pangolin. The FTO can be part of any fire team, but to be honest, that's actually not cheaper than a Zhanshi, so I don't know why we would even do that. So I'm just looking for one more unit, which is going to cost 13 points approximately, maybe less. And maybe even I could afford another Zhanshi. Do I want a hacker? No, I don't want a hacker. I've got the engineer. No, with the engineer, I'm definitely going to want to take the Yao Zhao. So that means that the final unit I think is just going to be a baggage bot, unless I can take more of these Yao Kongs. No, I can't. Okay. So back to the Pangolin, and then I'm sort of I've got just about enough, and the Zhanshi over here. I wonder if the sniper rifle... No, I've already got a sniper rifle. The HMG is kind of what I want there. I could actually upgrade one guy to be a couple more points. Yeah, okay. So if we come back and put that paramedic back in there. There we go. Okay. This is starting to look a bit closer. So what I want to do now is spread the Lujings out between groups. because you don't want to be in a position where you find the golden opportunity opening to live the dream and have your Lujings show up on the side of their table or in a corner where there's no enemies. And if that happens, you don't want to be landing all the Lujings and running out of orders with them. So by splitting the list up like this, you're going to have 2 in one group and the other in the other group, so you can sort of spread the units into both sort of tag teams. The Evo is in the group which has more orders, so that's going to mean that after you put up control jump, they all benefit from it, and then they have 7 orders each, including their own ones. The opponent is going to be looking at this list and not really knowing, because they're not going to see the Lujings. They're going to see a Link team plus a Pangolin here, and they're going to see a couple of Flash bots and a TR bot. I think a really, really good player might figure out you have Lujings, but a lot of people are going to look at this and assume that you have a Hack Tau and maybe 1 or 2 Lujings at most. And that's sort of the way they're going to view this. So there is a fair bit of surprise going on. But yeah, as you can see, the idea is that you can sort of shoot a couple things long range with your high Dao and your TR bot if they're kind of a little bit on the weaker side with AROs, or if you want to risk it, if the enemy's got something which is seriously watching a lot of stuff near the deployment zone, you can sort of gamble a little bit and fire at it with a high Dao, and if you do win the shootout, then the Lujings can start landing. I think the biggest weakness of this list actually is hacking, because a lot of lists these days have a repeater network, at least one hacker, and the Lujings have to show up nearby, but it's not always the end of the world. A Lujing that drops and gets hacked, it's not always that bad if it's just one Lujing that has that happen to it. It is BTS 3, remember. If it gets isolated, it's not too big a deal. If it gets frozen, if that only lasts until the end of the turn, well, the Lujing's still there to ARO them at close range in their turn. It's very good at dodging, by the way. Dodge plus 2 inches, the Viz 13. But don't forget, guys, if your opponent has like one Interventor or just Jazz, and the Lujing lands next to her and she hacks him, then she's going to take an armor save against combat drop explosion and may die, which is a great trade for you. Or that model may either fail the whip check, or you may pass the BTS save, and you're in a situation where the next order you move into close combat, or even just stand there and shoot, and it's much more likely you'll win the face-to-face roll when you're hitting on 19s with 2 dice of the boarding shotgun, or just going idle, they hack you and you lay down 2 boarding shotguns onto them, because that then allows you to bring all of your other Lujings on once you've killed that Jazz or the Interventor, because they may have run out of hackers to use their repeater network with. So hacking is a weakness, but it's not necessarily the end of the world. You also have amazing Lieutenant assassination potential with all 4 of them. And if your opponent starts the turn a lost Lieutenant and you've got a bunch of Lujings in the deployment zone, it's kind of awkward for them. So if you're a good player, or if you just like interesting lists, I don't really think of this as a meme list. I think that if you're careful about it, and you play this list for the right missions, on the right tables, against the right factions, it's actually quite a strong way of playing Infinity. Again, don't be put off by the occasional bad experience where you run this kind of thing and just nothing works. Have another Invincible Army list alongside this, which can actually handle most of the heavy lifting. With Invincible Army in general, I think one great way to play is just purely with the Hack Tau and lots of TR bots and Engineer and lots of Flash bots. That's a nice safe way of doing it. And of course, high down the Link team. If you really want to go balls to the wall, you can take the Tactical Awareness, Pain Train. That's pretty decent. It's just that it does suffer against hacking as usual. Yes, you've got the 10 bot. Yes, you've got the High Dao Killer Hacker, but it's not wonderful if your opponent puts a repeater near you and just starts hacking you, and it against spotlights it does get pretty awkward. So Invincible Army, not the most powerful faction in the world, but if you're serious about doing really, really well with them, consider this as part of your arsenal. It's really, really cool fun. And with that, I think I'm just going to end this episode of Let's Build Some Lists. I hope you guys had a really good time coming with me through my thought process, and hope you learned a thing or two. And make sure that you hang around and watch some games from our Season 4 Infinity League, and the Meme League, of course, coming right up.